Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree. Joining me today, as always, is Sridhar Chityala as we take a look at this 37.5 plus growing trillion debt of United States and try to understand where it is growing. And there is a shutdown right now. What is the implications of that? Why is this being shut down? All that and more with Sridhar Chityala. Sridhar namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you, sir?
Namaskar, doing very well, sir. So very happy to be speaking with you, Sree, and on Sunday evening, so India time, and of course, you are in early morning in the West Coast. Nice to talk to you.
Yes, indeed, sir. You're resplendent in Tripundra and also Chandan and Kumkum, and looking very godly, sir. Thank you so much for taking part in this show today. We're going to take a look at this debt. This debt, there is an interest portion of it, and that has crossed close to $1 trillion. I'm just giving big picture thing. Perhaps after you do this deck, I have a few specific questions about who is the money owed to. Are they going to get it? Are they in danger of not getting it? Would it also affect things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all of which has been paid for more or less by the people? And now are they going to be left holding the bag? All that and more. Over to you, sir.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you. It is the most interesting topic, and I think the most talked about is the U.S. economic system or U.S. monetary system is going to collapse tomorrow, day after. Yes. Few days and few years from now, and the world will go a different way. Well, there's been enough pundits who have been kind of talking about it. Having been in some way part of the government in the treasury between 2016 to 2020, we'll kind of put some perspectives and comments in terms of looking at the way the data is and looking at the way CBO looks out, that is Congressional Budget Office, looks at the data and maps out the strategy for both domestic consumption and for the political consumption, as well as for the global, whether they believe it in or not. But this is the pattern that has been going on, and we'll cover some of these facets from real data from the Congressional Budget Office. Okay, next slide. So I think Sree ji set the context. Can US address its 37 or signs of collapse emerging? Okay. First and foremost, there are no signs of economic collapse. There's no signs of United States going under. The debt spiral from 2015 will show the chart. CBO flags growing US debt as a burden that the US has to face, and the money has to be set aside for the interest rather than for developmental projects. Now, some of the tariff policies, whether you agree or not, Capital is looking at some of these things. You may not agree with any of that, but that's okay, but that's still the data. The debt drivers will push borrowing beyond 7% of GDP. Not today. It will push it, in the outer year 2050 or 2055, when the gap diverges between receipts and expenses. That is the 7% of the GDP deficit. Then we have a forecast which is again reflected from the CBO, and is there a way out for United States? Okay, so this is the kind of the strategic context. The next slide. Okay, can the US tackle its $37 trillion debt or the visible signs? I have answered the question as a banker. I've spent close to 35 years in banking in United States. Plus, I have also worked with 3 treasurers, and I have been part of at least 1 or 2 administrations, without going into the specific details, very specifically focused around how do we kind of manage especially the balance sheet, notably the debt part of it, and how do you fund several developmental programs when you have a kind of a gap. It also includes the rollover of the debt. So I'll give you the overarching headline, and then I'll make my kind of surmise or story. Can the US tackle its 37? The answer is yes. What kind of financial tools and financial engineering will be done remains fairly open at this stage. They say, what is the kind of the overarching theme here? Can you pay the interest? Can you fund the interest cost of your budget because it is a line item on the expense of the balance sheet? The answer is yes. So therefore, and we will project the outlays. But it's not a situation we want to continue to. United States must somewhere look at it and say, okay, would you like to reduce it by 5 trillion, 7 trillion? So the interest burden comes out. Mind you, this is where the cost of funds, the prime rate makes a huge difference between 4.1, 4.15% to 2%, which means you pay lower costs on the debt that you have. Okay, this is another battle that Trump is having, without kind of the econometrics behind it. Next slide. So we kind of look at this particular chart. It's for people to understand. This is produced by the St. Louis Fed, and very interesting data, which is very obvious, but people don't kind of. The debt was close to 2% or less than 2% of the GDP in 2015. You can see the slide. It bumped up to about very close to, I would say, about 3% when the debt reached 600 kind of, when the interest costs on the balance sheet moved to $600 billion around 2018-19. And 2019 is the inflection point when Fed cut the interest rate rather than taking the interest rate from 1.9 to 2.25 to 2.5. They brought the interest rate back to below 2%. This is during that period when there was battle between Bernanke and Trump, and they kind of resolved that. And then we got to around that from 3% to again back to 2%. And we also did during that period rebalancing of the debt with lower cost, which is the reason why the interest costs came down. And interest cost was around $400 to $600 billion as a cost, and it is as a percentage of GDP somewhere between 2 to 3%. Then what happened? Then came COVID. When COVID came, there's a lot of pressure that was put on the economic system. And only way you can reverse the curve of downward slide of the economic growth is to inject significant amount of capital into the system. Lo and behold, $10 trillion was put into the system, if you recall, during the Trump, almost the fag end of the Trump period. And then what happened? Then came a series of budget measures, Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Act, and Economic Enhancement Act, etc. And further escalated the debt, and the interest costs spiraled between the 2021 to 2024. And as we sit today, it has not yet hit $1 trillion, though the projection kind of points that way. It's around $858 to $900 billion that you see in the balance sheet, and the debt is almost 100% or greater than 100% of the GDP right now as we speak. This is the curve that points out how the government made a deliberate measure in terms of injecting significant amount of capital to retool the economy, but at a huge cost to the debt, US debt. There's no game in town. This was the game in town. Remember, many countries, including India, put debt into the balance sheet to rejig the economy, and they're harmonizing it right now. Next.
Sridharji, before we go to the next slide, just keep it here for a second. Sir, I have one question. The Biden administration knew it was running up these deficits like crazy. Yet, this administration, and I'm very, very careful in choosing my words here, this Biden administration completely threw the caution to the winds and allowed between 11 to 15 million illegals, all of whom unemployable, unusable, and have become a burden to the society. Now they are fighting the law and order apparatus of United States when they are being shown the door. Why did the Biden administration, knowing fully well that it was dispersing money like there was no tomorrow, do this one act, sir? What was the big rationale behind it?
Well, I think we have to, you use your words very carefully and very appropriately, which is namely Biden administration. Now, the question I still doubt in my mind whether it is Biden administration or whether it was authored by Biden and implemented by his administration. It is believed there are many people around the Biden administration who are responsible, both within the government and outside the government, who had significant influence. I think we have covered those stories in terms of who funded many of these people to come in, etc. And then how some of these programs, this famous 4 or 5 member team, the Progressive Freedom Caucus, how they kind of managed with the House majority to get many of these fundings and many of these schemes into play. They threw all of the caution. They didn't care about United States. They threw caution to the winds, and many of the programs, they even took money from veteran affairs to fund healthcare and other kind of programs for the illegals.
Emergency. FEMA also.
Yeah, FEMA also. So I think, why did they do that? They did that because they clearly believe that these were the people they needed, and to have an entire kind of, the theory is a political control so that they can permanently rule United States in a way that kind of aligned with this left-wing mindset, which is namely, there is no tomorrow, keep on going. People will argue why then Trump came in and added $3 trillion over 10 years to the debt. Then his answer would be something different. But we'll get to that, Sree. But you asked the question, why 11-12 million? No nation can allow. You can see Europe as an example as to what has happened. No nation can allow that many illegals and get legitimately funded. When you have legitimately funded, means you give them debit cards, blank debit cards. You give them loaded with money. You tell them, when that finishes, you can load that. You can go to hospital. You can be given temporary work orders. In some states, even went to the extent of saying, you don't need all documentation. You can be given a driver's license or a work permit as an ID. So when you look at these types of schemes, economic development or economic agenda was not the criteria, or the balance sheet of the US government was not the criteria. The whole goal was to redraw the political map of the United States. That is why they allowed all kinds of people, which we have covered quite extensively. It's a very, very sad point in the history of the United States. We'll see how it plays out in the years to come, Sree.
Sir, one request to all our viewers. Many of you are registered Democrats. You continue to vote Democrat. Fine, no problem. Please answer by way of your comments what you have to say about how the Biden administration ran this thing up. What do you think is going to happen to your future? Next slide, please. Sir.
Yeah. So if you take a look at what we call as the debt elevation, the chart, when it is expected, this has been mapped to about 2055, when it is expected to reach somewhere close to 150% of the GDP. Okay, it will continue to rise. Why? We will demonstrate it in 2 charts from this. So you can see here, during the World War, it was 100% natural, because only government can borrow and put money to revive. They brought it down to about 50% of the GDP, and then slowly the ascent began. The first point of ascent is 2000-2008 financial crisis. Then you ran up the debt again to infuse the balance sheet into the corporations of the country, and the debt ran up to about 70-75% of the GDP. Because now you're confident that you can somehow have the receipts, and you can manage it, and you can include it and run it. Then it went up when the pandemic came. That's what we kind of discussed. So US Congressional Budget Office, this data is also from Congressional Budget Office. They're not living in kind of cuckoo's land. They have mapped out what the problem is, so that they can clearly present to the people who run the country, this is what you are looking at. Make a decision based on what you're looking at, so that don't tell that, we haven't provided you with this data and raise the red flags. So it is what we call as the debt elevation is going to continue to rise unless there is a financial intervention or there is financial engineering. Both, I don't know which one is going to happen. What's a financial elevation? What is a financial intervention? Financial intervention is you sell some assets, or you take some part of the debt and park it in, some vehicle with which the debt will be addressed. We have done that in the banking industry, and we have done that in a manner that we call it as good assets and bad assets, and we kind of try to manage it and pay it out over a period of time. So therefore, whether they will do that or whether they will do some form of financial engineering, which is to say, we'd like to re-amortize or come up with some scheme which will help it to move it forward. The United States has done this before, and let us see what happens. Next slide.
So now you are coming to my payday, sir. Re-engineering the assets to a value which is more palatable.
Yeah.
Next, exactly. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So US debt will eventually exceed 7% of GDP. Now, if we can blow this chart, you will see what's happening here is that there is what we call as the primary deficit, and then you have the net interest overlay, then you have the total deficit. At some point of time, the primary deficit, which is when you include your healthcare, Social Security, defense, some mandatory and discretionary expenses, you compile that, and then you add then the interest overlay. You can see from around 2025. Yeah, from around 2000, I need the dates. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, got it.
From around 2025, but you step into 2030, you are going to see the interest cost will overtake the primary deficit costs, and this is where I think things can go haywire, in terms of the total cost. But if you are sitting as a treasurer or treasury secretary and managing this, then the question therefore comes in, okay, how do I kind of address this issue, and what kind of financial tools that are available to me so that, that it doesn't become an impaired balance sheet, as we call within the financial industry. So they don't want to make it an impaired balance sheet. They have projected the cost overlays, and I think as Sree pointed out, it's not at $1 trillion on the interest costs, but it will be soon $1 trillion, and it can go up to $1.3 to $1.5 trillion, which will cross the total cost of healthcare and Social Security. Two items alone, the top two items. So this is what the challenge. Why we are reaffirming and repointing this is that this data is available to CBO. This data is available to the Congress. They are not kind of blindfolded in terms of moving forward, but they say that they can tackle this issue. Of course, United States history is replete with bankers addressing this type of crisis, including the World War crisis, and coming up with schemes which preserves and protects. But we'll get to that in the end, in terms of, does the United States have a balance sheet in terms of assets, in terms of it, managing its position. So what are the key drivers? The key drivers are very clear. Interest cost is the key driver. That is the biggest key driver of the cost. That's number one. Number two, which we will show in another chart, which is namely that the gap between the revenues, the growth of revenues, and economic outlook or economic growth, if there is a gap between those two, again, your deficit is going to continue to kind of grow. Okay. So, for example, this is the 30 years ahead revenue. If you take a look at the revenues are 17.2% on an average between 1995 to 24, and outlays were 21.1. So, which means there is a total deficit of 3.9%. So, there has never been, barring Bill Clinton period, there has never ever been balancing of the budget. They're always running around 4% of the GDP, which is considered, 6% is considered the red line. Once you cross 6%, it means that the gap is so wide that it is going to be pretty much impossible unless the government comes up with an intervention scheme. So 3.9% in 1995 to 24. Actually, in 2024, the revenues, the outlays were 23, the revenues continued to be 70, revenues decreased 17.1, and the expenses increased from 21.1% to 23.4%. This slide will be put up, so those who want to kind of look at it can look at it. So the deficit goes to 6.4%. You can see the cost of primary deficit, or the primary deficit, going from minus 2.1% or 2.1% of GDP and growing to 3.33%, and then it tapers down, which effectively means that the primary deficit, which includes non-interest rate, they are managing that, or it's a numbers game, whereas the interest cost is the one that effectively they need to look at much more closely. And those numbers are visible to you. It grows from 3.1 to about 5.4%, 2055. That's a significant number in terms of, how you look at, the budgetary economics or the budgetary model of the United States. So you can see the outlays growing at a very, very small rate, and the deficit growing at a much higher rate, or the cost growing at a much higher rate, causing in this kind of impairment. So we went from 21.1 to almost 27% by the time we get to 25.3% when we get to 2045. So the next slide.
Sir, before we go there, a small request. Sir, get a sip of water, sir. Your throat is running dry, I think.
Yeah.
One request to viewers. Viewers, this is what we call in American parlance as serious shit. Meaning, like, we're talking actual numbers, we're talking calculations, and you're projecting it outwards. Serious stuff. And if I look at the number of people who have liked this video, it's abysmal. And I'd appreciate it very much if you please will like this video. Sridhar ji has spent, I think, at least 72 hours doing this stuff, and we go through a lot of discussions before we come up with the programming for this particular program, because we want to give you the truth. Because all these things, if they start going out of whack, what's going to happen to you as a average US taxpayer? You could be a resident, you could be a green card holder, you could be H1B, you could be a citizen. All your payments are going to get affected. You are going to start seeing Medicare, more money to be paid from your, if you are in Medicaid or Medicare, you'll have to start paying more co-pay. Your insurance rates are going up. Your social security payments are in doubt. This is another thing that we are all scared of. But at least you need to understand the truth. Don't just go and blindly vote for your local politician because he seems to be somebody that you know. Do your homework. I'm not saying you have to blindly go and vote somebody else. Whoever you vote, make sure that that person is deserving of your vote. The midterms are coming up in a month's time in California. We have to vote for a lot of things. And then what do the assemblymen and senators of state of California do? They go and vote on SB 509 without understanding a shit about what it intends to do. The whole governance has been captured by one vocal list of illegals mostly. Sir, things are, you said that New York is worse than California. Sir, both are going race to the bottom. Both are trying to go to the bottom, sir. Reckless rascals is all I can say. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Sree. So when you look at this is where the rubber hits the road. The growth of the GDP growth peters out by 2055, goes to 1.4%. By then, the deficit is around 7% of the GDP, the difference between receipts and expenses. We can put the two slides one above the other, because then you can see how the deficit has grown, which means the debt is going to grow, because that's borrowed money to keep the balance sheet even, right? So you can see 7.3%, and the economic growth around that year is 1.4%. It's around somewhere around 6%, and then 2045 is 1.5. So really, United States has to not only grow somewhere between 2 to 4% or 2 to 3%, but it also needs to cut this deficit issue. The only way they can cut the deficit is by reducing the cost of the debt that is going to get out of control very, very soon. Are people panicking? The answer is no. Why? Because they believe government or private enterprises will find a solution to this problem. Okay. But just if I have to, shift a little bit and digress for a minute, CNBC just released data. 5% of the population, 5% of the population increased their wealth by 52 trillion. 5% of the population increased their wealth by 52 trillion in United States. That is only 37 trillion. So, I mean, I'm just giving a clue. If all is doom and gloom, where is this economic outcome and where is the lift in the balance sheet of these huge billionaires, and not a small amount that is spread across this specific group. Also, millionaires, in this definition of millionaires, the study pointed out that is those with $2 million of investable assets, their wealth also grew quite substantially on the back of a very strong and resurgent tech-based US economy. Next slide.
Thank you, sir. Let's go back to our slide deck. Thank you so much. Let's go back to the slide deck.
Yeah, next.
Sir.
Next. So this is only to point out against that the economic outlook. You take a look at the inflation, you look at the average interest rate. It's very interesting data. You need to blow up the slide, the previous slide.
Previous one, please.
And then go full slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has to do one process. Got it. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, got it. So if you take the 10-year treasury, which is a benchmark, 1995 to 2024, it averaged 3.7%. What was it in 2024? We are between 4 and 5%. That's the cost. Okay. And 2025, we have just come down to about 4.1%. The assumption that the Fed rate, 10-year rate, is somewhere between 3.8 to 3.8%. That's the assumption under which this is built. That's one assumption. Okay, labor force participation rate, because the prime driver of receipts is the personal taxes. So therefore, you see the labor force participation rate, which averaged 65% in the 1995 to 2024, is kind of slowly dipping. And by the time it comes to 2055, it's going to be 61%. 4% drop in participation rate clearly has implications on the revenue side of the balance sheet. So these are some of the numbers that people have to kind of factor in. And then when you look at the inflation is around, varies from 2.1% to about 2%. Okay, and a growth of the consumer price for all urban consumers is slightly more elevated by about 300 basis points. As far as the real inflation, which adjusted to GDP, is between 2.8 to 1.4%. Again, that's a very flat kind of. No, this is the GDP growth. The GDP growth is 2.8% to 1.4%. This is the number that I pointed out, which is if there is no proximity between the deficit to the growth, the real GDP growth, then again the government has a problem in terms of generating revenues and making other kinds of revenue management schemes come into play. So why we have pointed out all of this is this data is very clearly visible. This data is published. This data is with the Congress, is via Congressional Budget Office to the House Committee, the Senate Finance Committee. Everybody is looking at it. The Fed is looking at it. So therefore, it's not that the US is blindfolded. So the question that comes up is, before we kind of look at what could be the venue, is that everybody points out, I have no problem, everybody points, US dollar is going to weaken, US economy is going to collapse, and kind of start shifting. The answer is, what is the drivers and how do people see this happening? Is it because you are talking about an economy, which is 30 trillion plus? How is it going to, what are the systemic parameters under which this one can say, it is all going to collapse? But take a look at the imbalance. The topmost economy is around 30 trillion plus. The next economy is around 19 trillion plus. Then you begin to slide into $4-5 trillion economies, not even 5 trillion, $4 trillion economies, about 4-5 of them. You know, Germany, India, UK, and Japan. So what are the systemic parameters that one is looking at to say, okay, this whole thing is going to kind of collapse without a quantitative explanation of the drivers and parameters, rather than making a lot of arbitrary statements that everything is going to be kind of falling apart, and dollar is okay. Dollar no longer a reserve currency. Doesn't matter. It doesn't bother. Dollar no longer need to print the dollar. Remember, everything is in dollar. If everything is in dollar, just like everything is in rupee, you're dealing with the issue locally. And so, which is the reason why Trump is saying, hey, whether I agree with him or disagree with him is a completely different point. You want to manufacture and give it, put it in our country. You want to do this, do it here. You want to avail our markets, put your capital here. So that the economic activity happens in the same. That's what India is doing. Manufacturing in India is what? Is basically you want it in rupee. Manufacturing in China is what? Renminbi. Nobody talks about, for about 20 to 25 years, renminbi has been averaging between 6% to 7.2%, completely currency manipulated. Nobody questions. Nobody questions whether that is the right approach and how does it affect all the adjacent economies. Okay, be that as it may, again, people can project, people can say, what do they see as the underlying issues and underlying kind of economic pointers that say, hey, this is 𝗥𝗘𝗙𝗥𝗘𝗥. Then we can begin to analyze it differently. Now, the US also looks at its assets. What is the total financial position? $270 trillion. And a debt of 146 that includes government debt, intra-debt, personal debt, mortgage, all of that. When you add, it's $146 trillion. Still, there is a surplus of close to 123 trillion, which is probably 2 times, 3 times the economy of all other countries added up. These assets include a significant the investments that they made. There's also assets of commercial banks, assets of the central bank, and also assets of some public and private assets. So therefore, there is, and they haven't touched, there is an attempt that is going on to hedge a whole basket of assets behind the US dollar in the event, some instability question that's likely to spring up. So I don't see the collapse. I don't see the drivers. I don't see the dark clouds, except points out the debt is running out of control, the budget is running out of control, etc. Now, it is out of control relative to the past years. But is this a death knell? There are no indications that it is a death knell as yet, just based on at least the next 20 years of that.
Sir, one point here. You revalue your assets and then you say, okay, the debt has come down. From the common man's perspective, what is the risk that they have? Will the insurance payments continue to go up? Because they are not going up by 5%, sir. They are going up by 20% every year. In other words, in 5 years, your insurance payment goes up by double, and you have not fallen sick, you have not had an accident, your house has not collapsed.
Right. See, I think the interest costs, the underwriting costs have gone up because several of the areas, there has been significant claims. If you take a look at the last 5 years, significant claims for different reasons. And historically, when insurance premiums were established, the claims to the premiums ratio was, I haven't got the data, maybe we'll do a show on that, which is namely that that has gone up. So the only way they can make profit and at the same time service the claims that are being made for a range of reasons. I mean, you take a look at the cities, you take a look at suburbs. What has the illegal, so much of damage that has happened to property, so much of damage that has occurred to houses, So many, there's also been natural disasters in places like Florida, Texas, New Orleans, and so on. There's been, consistent fires in LA. How many riots have taken place in DC? How many riots have taken place in Los Angeles? How much has taken place in Atlanta? How much has taken place in New York? How much is taking place in Chicago? Who kind of is going to fund all these assets, Sree, in terms of getting them fixed? You have to make an insurance claim. So common man premium is going up because there are more claims, especially in the last, I would say, 15 years, 2010 to 2024, 25. It's been a lot of claims have kind of dramatically increased. Of course, we also face the crisis of the mortgage crisis between 2008 to 2012 that sustained till about 2016. Many people not paying principal or interest, and they were drawing on the whatever is the insurance claims that they could claim on in terms of making the minimum payments. So you have had substantial amount of claims that as a result has caused the uptick in the premium, Sree.
Thank you so much, sir. I have some questions, and we have a lot of questions from our viewers also. One simple thing, sir. Trump now is 7 months into his tenure. The number of illegals, you and I can agree on this, is between 11 to 20 million people. Let's say 15 million. And today, I'm just looking at it. I'm looking at how many deported.com. It has just crossed 258,000. It's about 259,000. And according to the Department of Homeland Security, about 1.8 million have self-deported. So let us say round it off to 2 million people have left, the illegals. That means there are still between 9 to 13 million illegals still floating around in the United States. For the longest time in the Biden administration, the Treasury was printing money without having any item tag against which the money could be spent, because Congress has to approve the spending. When 𝗏𝗏𝗍 started taking a look at it, they saw a total disconnect. Then they imposed the rule saying that Treasury expenses have to be against a certain line item. We talked about that in the beginning of this thing. So today's question, sir, is who is feeding all these illegals, and how is it that they are still making so many protests, especially in cities like Chicago, Portland, San Francisco is coming up next. You saw what happened in LA. Over to you, sir.
I think you have the answer lies in the question. So many of these cities are under, both the cities are under the mayoral Democratic party. The state is under Democratic rule. The states will not allow parachuting of National Guard to quell and deport. They will not allow ICE to work, and they continue to fund. The city and the state continues to fund these illegals with money that they don't have. And that is the reason why many of them flock to these cities where there is favorable administration to continue to support and sustain. Money is also illegally flowing through these well-established NGOs whom you and I know who they are.
Sridharji, wait a minute, sir, back it up 1 second. States cannot print money, sir. So where are states generating the money to pay these illegals?
States can divert the money that they receive. Divert the money that they can receive towards this purpose. And if they don't find the money, they will try to allocate money from what they get by way of allocation from the federal. And they have no accountability because they are the ruling power. That is how it has been funded.
Viewers, we tried our best to impeach the current sitting governor, Gavin Newsom, because of the Rakshasa type of majority that the Democrats enjoy in California. By the way, this was caused by Mr. Ronald Reagan, a Republican himself. In 1987, they had the act that allowed, if you illegally worked in the farms for 90 days, you automatically got a green card, and within 5 years you had a path to citizenship. These are the people sitting in California and voting Democrat. The problem I'm trying to tell you is, we tried our best to impeach this rascal, failed, and now he has hopes of becoming the president of United States. And I can tell you, he's not as, well, I won't, let's not draw comparisons. He's a more credible. He's got all the things that Soros would like in a candidate, and many of you also will do that. And please weigh your vote carefully before you vote for this rascal. That's all I can say, sir. Let's take some questions. Naresh wants to know, Vanakkam Sriji, is this the most awaited world order reset to crash the dollar and revalue US debt?
Well, I think that the US dollar and US balance sheet is a self-inflicted and self-managed process, and it has nothing to do with the resetting of the world order. The resetting of the world order could occur when we get to the fag end of, or the end of the tariff regime, and who will align and who will not align, and what kind of partnership. That would be the case. As far as the economic calendar that, or economic data that we have pointed out, that is self-inflicted. That's why we started the data with 2015. United States is confident, as long as it's a dollar issue, it can deal with it internally and deal with it effectively with its own financial system.
Next one, please. Ganeshan wants to know, who will survive finally and dominate the next decade? China, USA, or Russia, or all three?
US, China, and India will finally be the players of material interest as we put the economies from 2035 to 2050. Why I say 2035? At that point of time, I think India will be a $10 trillion economy. No one has breached as yet the $5 trillion, but barring China, nobody is at $10 trillion. Japan, Germany, UK, Italy, France, these big economies are never going to be $10 trillion economies. So in my view, US, China, and India will be the most economically and military powerful nations as we look ahead and look at the next decade. As far as Russia is concerned, will continue to be, as long as it has these energy resources, it will be a player of major economic and political strength.
Next question. Sir, you mentioned in passing about how US has allowed China to manipulate its currency. So even the number that they say as their nominal GDP is very questionable, sir. That's just my humble opinion. Let's go to Raghunandan's question. Trump is implementing Project 2025. Any hope left for Hindu Americans?
It's like it's like the rainbow. Depending on which part of the rainbow we are looking at and which part is brighter. Trump's policies, which were pro-Hindu American in the 2016-2020 period, is very passive as we look at 2025 to 2028. So whether the tide will turn, I don't know. But right now, whether he is really pro-Hindu American, it's highly questionable.
Next one, please. Vishwas Indraganti wants to know, can you please show US deficit as well, please? We showed it, right?
We can show the charts. You can publish the chart. You can publish all those data, Sree.
Yeah. Next question, please. There you go. Next one, please. This is the key one. This is the key one where you are seeing the interest component versus we spent a lot of time, Vishwas, on this one. Please go back to the video. You can take a look at it. Next question, please. Techie's Life wants to know one basic question. To whom is this debt owed? All looks like created from thin air.
No, US debt is owed. 80% of it is held by US public. United States public holds the largest. They look at it as their own country's debt. It is safe. It generates consistent return by way of interest, which ranges from 3% to 4%. It has a good yield. So 80% is held. No sovereign nation. I think it's about nation can kind of dictate in terms of the debt that it has on the US balance, the debt that it owes to United States owes this debt to. China has been slowly what we call deaccelerating. Japan is a big debtor. EU is a big debtor. EU is one of the big debtors. And then, of course, India also has some debt. Then you have strategic players like Saudi Arabia, etc. So therefore, the debt is not going to be, it's not clear out of thin air. The treasuries are issued. Treasuries are distributed through institutional bankers. It's also distributed through wealth managers and many rich Americans, and even a common American through his 401k keeps a percentage of the US Treasury in his balance sheet, and it's liquid.
Some of you are saying you are not able to see the like button. I don't know which app you are running, whether it is Android or iPhone. You need to run the YouTube app, and I can see it on my iPhone. I'm also able to see it on my Android. It could be a version difference or something like that. Let's go to the next question, please. Techie's life. Also, what is the process of creating debt? It's all confusing. Who lends money to government? Why can't government just print money on its own? Then there is no debt.
Well, I think that the debt is created when you have a balance sheet. When we have a balance sheet, why is the government today shut down? The government is shut down today because an act has to be, the House and the Senate has to pass the bill which allows two things. One, accept deficit as outlined in the budget, and two, to increase the debt limit from 35 to 37, 37 to 39, so this deficit can be added to the total debt. And then what happens? Well, what happens then is, once it is approved, the T-bills are printed, approved by the Fed, and through the Fed, it gets distributed to institutions, and institutions in turn give it to their marquee customers.
Next one, please. Maithili wants to know, how far will crypto help in paying off the debt?
Well, I think that they have I'm told unofficially, $2 to $3 billion worth of crypto. This is seized crypto, and there is work underway to basically acquire, and whether they will apply it to the debt remains to be seen.
Next one, please. Vishwas wants to know, what if you include shocks? What then happens to the outlays? What happened in 2007 to 2008?
Well, I think that you saw what happened, which is namely that in 2007, when you have a major crisis like this, then the only mechanism is the government has to approve that there is a fiscal policy of inducing cash into the economy to offset the issue or to offset the grievance happens. Then the Treasury will then pass that to the Fed, whether it's by printing money or whether it is by other means. Then the Fed, in turn, used what you call quantitative easing to distribute to the banks who were the largest defaulters when there was an economic meltdown. That is how it gets into the system. The US has the right to print the currency and it uses the Treasury to distribute it through Fed broadly into the population, and it gets absorbed.
Next one, please. Ravi Benkal wants to know, the basic mentality of the world has shifted away from US to do business. How reliable is US as a business partner?
There are two things. The corporations in United States work with many corporations around the world. The US corporations have footprint in many parts of the world, they conduct their business, and only issue is around tariffs and import-export policies they deal with. But the government-to-government dealings is where the real policy and problem is. That is how United States has divorced itself between markets and government. The markets function and it is enforceable through well-defined processes. The government policies, which is more around trade and security, they are independent from the functioning of the markets.
Next one, please. Dilip Chanchani wants to know, just printing dollars, is it hoodwinking the world with no intentions of keeping commitments? Your view?
Well, sooner or later, this is going to come to a close. Okay, the printing of money. And whether at what point, it's hard to predict, but it is not going to be a sustained going on printing dollars. It happened earlier during the World War. It happened in 2007-8 crisis. It happened, which was the biggest pandemic that we recently witnessed, after the great pandemic, and the financial, the borrowing happened leveraging the US power and dollar. Okay, so the question is, what is the strategy for US? Right now, tariffs are aimed at reducing, according to the US economists, reducing the deficit and basically addressing the debt situation. But the way it is being done is universally critiqued by all people, that this whole tariff process is random and arbitrary, and whether it is sustainable remains to be seen. Whether it eventually make the legal process or legal system also remains to be seen. But right now, that's the game that is being run.
Next one, please. Gauri Dhumal wants to know, what is the impact on non-tech sectors like retail?
Retail continues to grow. Walmart had good earnings. Amazon is actually a retail. What has happened is the consolidation of retail plus complete shifting to online is affecting companies, the traditional companies like Kmart, Target, Safeway, all these institutions you no longer hear because it is now...
Foot traffic has reduced. Foot traffic has reduced. Traffic has reduced
considerably, especially when you have a law and order problem in several of these big cities.
Yes. Sir, Democrats cannot be expected to think such broad vision, sir, that when you bring in millions of people and, put them in ghettos and then pay them money and expect them to obey the laws and rules and not ignore the fact that many of them can't read and write English. There is God. Sajid Kumar, thank you so much. Please send this podcast to General MS Dhoni also. As a subscriber, please tell me, whom should I trust? Sridhar ji or all others like Dhoni, most of whom have finished off USA and China 100 times. Sajid, this is economics, that is geopolitics, the two different circles. And we'll talk about geopolitics on a different day. Sir.
Well, I think US, China, and India will be three most powerful nations as we look out. Unless US and China is certain, unless there is some serious political intervention in India, but India is well on its way to become one of top three influential and powerful nations from an economic context. What India lacked was the manufacturing. I think they have been enhancing. What India lacked was production at a lower cost in its own territory. I think they have made considerable progress in that area. They needed capital, and they have achieved the flow of capital through this particular, the last 10 years or so. They needed markets, which runs at least along international lines. There may be here and there some corruption, but the markets are fairly efficient and run. Public can participate in markets, both international and domestic. It has got fifth largest market by market cap. It has got a very capable and highly respected defense, so it can secure. So a lot of things India has done over the last 10 years in terms of putting itself as a very powerful nation, despite a lot of kind of imbalances in politics and elections and legal system. One of the things we had recommended going back to 2014-15 is to create a financial litigation system in place like BKC, 𝗟𝗏𝗙𝗂 complex, which has a lot of banks and central bank, so that enforcement and resolutions can happen for both domestic and international corporations as far as the banking is concerned. Banking matters are concerned, securities matters are concerned. Of course, if you lump that into the national Supreme Court system, then that's an area that even small country like Singapore has accomplished, but India has not.
Sir, it is Bandra Kurla Complex, BKC.
Yeah, Bandra Kurla Complex, BKC.
Next one,
Bandra. Okay, sorry.
Selva, thank you for becoming YouTube member. Next one, please. Prasanna Joshi wants to know, will US government revalue gold and adjust debt against it?
No, such schemes are not, because they will work very closely with all other central banks. There's a lot of banks, a lot of countries which hold gold. So the revaluation, and remember there was an attempt by Tesla chairman Elon Musk to actually do an audit and value the US gold in Fort Knox, and that idea was outrightly dismissed. It could be for two reasons.
Why, sir?
Huh?
Yeah, go ahead.
They could have plenty, or something could have been ferried away, Sree. So both can happen in the United States. You know that.
BVSSRS Guntur. Sir, can we all empathize with those that lost jobs since 2022 and still cannot get their life back?
We salute and empathize with them, but that's not going to solve the problem. And we have shown the participation rate as projected by CBO coming from 65% to 60%, significant number from a US domicile-based perspective.
Next one, please. Vishwas wants to know, is there a scope for reducing US debt by monetizing the gold US has on its balance sheet? We just answered this. Let's go on to the next one. Sujata, thank you so much for becoming YouTube member. And finally, Techies Live, thank you so much. Great enthusiastic presentation. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, sir. And that brings us to a close of today's program. I hope you liked it. You all responded by liking the video when I made a request. Thanks one and all. This needs to reach far and wide, because a lot of home truths, especially those of us who are Indian Americans who are voting in the United States, and we continue to vote in a certain way. I'm not saying one way or the other. Please apply your minds before you vote. That's all I would say. And data like this, programs that we put out in PGurus, is all thought-provoking, and you need to spend. Don't tell me every time I meet people, they say, yeah, but it's too short, too long. Can you do any minute reduction in what Sridharji said today? You can't, because there are so many things that have to be touched upon before coming to the bigger picture. And I'm really indebted to Sridharji for taking the time to put together this presentation and then for us to put it out. Thank you once again, Sridharji. Namaskar.
Thank you, and thank you to all the listeners and viewers, and best wishes, Sree.